So it's just figuring out how to keep the kids going year to year because, they drop off, they graduate, get busy. So
Can you kind of refresh our memory, the S&4C?
yeah. Sorry. So I'm with Southern Newcastle County Communities Coalition. We do peer-to-peer prevention with our kids. So we're in one school district in 4 high schools. It's peer-led clubs where basically they get to choose a topic with substance abuse or vaping or whatever they decide. And they pretty much do peer-to-peer messaging. They've done PSAs, they do TikToks, they do a lot. They do movie nights, they
Got it.
like literally whatever they want to do, they can do. As long as it's like safe activities for the kids to do and they have our support. So
Could you put the coalition email address or the name in the chat box, please? I want to, I want to share it. This sounds like it's a really good program.
Yeah, and like last year, this one club had about like 10 students, and now they're over 50 per club meeting, where it's just expanded quickly this year, and I just want to keep it going with like a lot of kids. So
why do you think that is? What was it?
I have no clue. And that's the weird part is like, I don't know if it's just because we really emphasize this year that it's their club and they can run it. I have no clue. That's what I'm still trying to figure out because it's only like 2 of my clubs are like high achieving, and then I have 2 clubs that are like 3 to 4 students a meeting. So it's just a weird mixture.
Is it the makeup of the students? I'm trying to
I have no clue. I think we took some kids to CADCA and they loved it. So I don't know if that's kind of spear-led some of their sparking, but yeah.
Well, it sounds like you all are an example, if you will, of what happens when you actually allow the youth to kind of have meaningful roles in kind of how to go about doing things and expressing things and providing their voice to kind of the issues that we're trying.
Yeah, because like I really emphasize them like this is their club, and my expectation is for our facilitator and for me when I come in there to be sitting in the back of the room. They do their PowerPoints, however they want to do it, and run it like it's theirs. So
phenomenal. Yeah. Well, I'm going to go. Thank you, Abigail. I appreciate that. Anybody else have any other thoughts about sustainability and what it is that you wanted to make sure that at least you were able to get out of this time that we were going to spend together? Caitlin, any expectation that you have? And you don't have to.
I think I'm more interested in the sustainability after like impacts after COVID.
Okay.
Because I feel like maybe that might be one of the reasons some of your groups, Abigail, are a little on the higher side. Like for 2 years, basically, kids weren't really allowed to do a whole lot. So now they're like, oh, I want to do everything, but are we gonna be able to make that last for like the upcoming years, or is it just gonna be like a 1-2 year kind of thing?
Love that. Okay, fantastic. Hey, Miss Brianna, how are you? Good to see you. Do you have any expectation for today that you'd like to share? You don't have to have one.
No, I'm just going to listen out, and if I have any questions, I'll ask because it's my second session joining in. So, not right now.
We're glad to have you, and I'm happy that you're here. How about you, Miss Maria? Any expectation for today?
Oh, not at the moment. If I have any questions, like Brianna said, I'll just ask too. I'm just listening as well.
Not a problem. Thank you so much for being here. Hey, Dion, any additional thoughts? You've been working with this in so many ways, in so many capacities, and at so many levels. Thoughts and any expectations for the training that you're particularly listening out for?
No, I know it's going to be great and comprehensive, and we can get a lot out of it to include in our programming.
Oh my goodness, I could not have organized a much more wonderful segue to begin this training. Let me go ahead. Let me start off by beginning to share my PowerPoint and the screen. And to provide and offer an official welcome. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for being with us throughout this series that we've provided for you all as prevention workforce leaders in the state of Delaware. It has really been an honor to be able to kind of help and to work with Dave and Dorothy and our other colleague, Dave Closson, who's been a part of this series, to begin to be thoughtful about breaking down the elements and the components of being an effective prevention leader, and what does that mean, and bring the resources and tools to help us to think through some of these concepts, which sometimes may seem off-putting, to be very, very honest, to many folks. We want to thank you for bringing your insights, your experience to these conversations. It has made these training sessions, I believe, really, really robust. And that's really as a result of the investment of your own experiences and thoughts, and the inclusion of your voice into these trainings. And so we're going to do more of that throughout the training today. This actually represents kind of the last in this initial series. We're looking forward to being able to provide additional trainings for you all in the state, and we're thankful for the Kids Department and the state of Delaware for bringing us in for this effort. Let me start off with a bit of a question and invoke my dear colleague, partner, and friend, Dorothy, who she could share a little bit more about her lovely home, but her lovely home is 122 years old. And what I would ask is, what do you think is the reason that that home has been able to stay, and the reason for its longevity? What do you think might be some of the reasons for its longevity? And you can go ahead and put those in the chat. What's the reason for its longevity? Go ahead. Dave and Dorothy, when you see them begin to populate, go ahead.
Maintenance, yes, maintenance, love, and care. Yes, indeed. I can tell you there's been lots of maintenance. There's a lot of love in this house too. Yes, maintenance, love, and care. Good bones. Yes.
All right. All right. And you could expand on those thoughts as well, Dorothy.
You know, when I bought this house years ago, I never forget this. When I bought this house years ago, the man that inspected my house, that's exactly it, Dave. He went in and it's got an old stone foundation. It's like one of those old cellars. And he said, this house has been standing for 110 years. He said, this house is not going anywhere. This house is on the strongest foundation that was built stone by stone and created this really solid foundation. And you're right. I have been strategic about maintenance and care, and it's still standing strong at 122 years old.
Incredible, incredible. And is this the actual picture? I assumed as such. Is this the actual picture of your home?
This is my house.
It's beautiful. Yep. It's beautiful. I have, as you can tell, folks, I haven't had the opportunity of joining her there, but
thanks to
Google Maps.
Beautiful, beautiful. So as Dorothy mentioned, some of the factors that were necessary for sustaining her lovely home, I want you to think about your coalition or organization. And what does it take for it to operate over the long term? What are some of the factors that will sustain it for longevity? And go ahead and put those into the chat now, if you wouldn't mind. What factors will sustain your organization?
Partnerships. Absolutely. Yes.
What else? What else?
Strong foundation. Amen. Yes.
Good deal. Come on, y'all. Think about it.
You know what? I'm going to say love and care. Somebody said love and care for my house. I'm going to say love and care for your coalition too, because we can't just, take our foot off the gas and expect it to stay. Dion, committed staff. Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. You know what? It seems like it's the same elements, the same opportunities for us to kind of consider it. So these were just a couple of questions to help us to get into the frame of mind for the conversation that we want to have. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and introduce yourselves and your organization that you are representing here, which provides some opportunity for us to be thoughtful about interacting with you on today. I just want to share with you that the webinar is being recorded and will be archived and available to you afterwards, that these views that we're expressing are our own and aren't the policies, positions of SAMHSA or the state of Delaware in its totality. It is what we decided we were going to share with you. I'm more than pleased to have Dorothy, Chaney, and Dave Shavel, who are exemplars in this field of prevention across our nation and internationally. I want to state publicly, it has been a joy to work with these individuals over the years. And so thank you guys for partnering with us to be able to provide this series of trainings to you all. This indeed is the last in this current session or series of prevention workforce training sessions that we are offering through this academy. As you will note, each of these trainings was intended to kind of build and kind of be integrated with each other, built upon the concepts of each other. So if you've missed any of these sessions, they are all available. You can reach out to the state, Christina, or you can reach out to me directly and I can provide you with the links to all the recordings. We will also have a handout for you all with links to resources that you'll be able to utilize to access some of the tools that we're going to be referencing throughout the day. Here are all the things that we hope to be able to get through on this day, and we're going to kind of go through each of these elements. Why sustainability is important. What are those key elements that we want to be attentive to, making sure that we're thinking about equitable considerations as we're doing this, and looking for how we might be able to think about funding strategies and next steps to foster sustainability as we are trying to engage and learn with and from each other. This is the agenda that we will go through on today that follows that. As I mentioned to you, there are going to be a host of resources that will be provided to you all after the training, and we're going to put these in the link for you all to be able to do this. As we go through the training today, don't worry if we begin to express ideas or thoughts that will include jargon that you're not familiar with. Please stop us and let us know so that we might be able to add the clarification that's necessary. And with that, Dave, forgive me, but you know where I've been. And so thank you so much for pointing to yourself, Dorothy. I love you for that. You did that so very, very well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can go ahead and share yours and we can get into this conversation. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Carlton. And I'm really loving this series. And this is my favorite topic to really talk about because it's such an important element, and sustainability starts at the very beginning of our work. And so it's great for us to cover it last so that we can reflect on all of the other things that we've talked about over the course of our time together. So let's set the stage by just talking about what is sustainability in sort of defining and answering that question. So let me ask you, we talked about what it takes to sustain my 122-year-old house, which makes me very happy. How would you define sustainability, or how do you define sustainability? You can either put your answer in the chat box, or there's just a small group of us. So I'd encourage you to unmute and just, how do you define sustainability in your own words? Any thoughts?
Abigail talked earlier about, she wants to make sure the kids keep coming, and that we again, think about a school program, there's always a new cadre of freshmen coming in. And so we need to refresh it. And it may be the same thing to us, but to these new young students coming in, it's fresh to them, it's new to them. So how do we keep their interest, their excitement up?
Yeah, and isn't that so Dion, love it, lasting. Becca said what's going to keep people interested and engaged and involved. So absolutely, how do we keep what we've got and how do we make sure that it stays? And that's what we're talking about with sustainability, is how do we keep it moving? How do we keep the ball in the air? How do we keep things moving?
Dorothy, what I love is no one's put money yet, which is great. Sustainability isn't, if you do these things we're talking about, the money will follow, but you have to have these things in place before you can go out and ask for that money. And we'll be talking about that today.
Right. Thank you, Dave. So Naya said refreshing and increasing chance of return. That's it. That's exactly it. All of those things are what we're talking about when we're talking about sustainability. So to actually look at some actual definitions from SAMHSA, sustainability is the capacity of a community to produce and maintain positive prevention outcomes over time. So it's about maintaining outcomes. But in order to maintain positive outcomes, we want to sustain an effective strategic planning process, as well as those programs and practices. And accomplishing both of these things requires our community. So when we're looking at sustainability through the lens of SAMHSA, or when we're looking through the lens of maintaining our prevention programs, we're really talking about sort of three elements to sustainability. So certainly, we want to sustain the outcomes. We want to make sure that we're making an impact in our work and that it's staying. We also want to sustain the process. In our case, the process is the strategic prevention framework. And we want to make sure that we're sustaining that process, that credible planning process that actually gets us to outcomes. And the last element of sustainability is building ownership, is making sure that the community, our partners, our stakeholders are committed to this for the long term, because our work is really a marathon, not a sprint. And so it's interesting, when we were listening to the conversation about the kids, you were talking about the fact that they were running the meetings and that they had gone to get training at CADCA, and that you were sort of standing back and empowering them to do the work. That builds ownership. That's one of the strongest elements of sustainability. So those are sort of the elements of sustainability, but there's also levels to sustainability. One level is sustaining our coalition. And when I think about sustaining our coalition, I think about those environmental strategies, that looking at what's happening in the community, because that's really the unique role of the coalition, is to look at those environmental strategies. But I also think there's another level or layer, and that's maintaining prevention providers. And those providers, many of you are direct service providers, provide those individual strategies like programs and resiliency. And then the third level is those programs, is how do we actually sustain those programs? So there's different elements of sustainability, and there's also different levels to sustainability. And when we put those pieces together, that gives us sort of that fuller picture of what it is that we're looking to accomplish when we're talking about sustainability. So now that I've defined sustainability in terms of the elements and the levels or the layers, I'd like to check in with you. And Becca, you really have sustainability successes when you're talking about definitely this year and those two groups that have 50 plus youth. But I'm interested to hear from folks, what successes have you had in building sustainability?
Who are you calling on, Dorothy?
I was just asking everyone if anybody had any successes that they would like to share in sustainability.
And ask anybody whose program has been around for longer than 2 years, it's sustainable. What has been the keys to sustaining your coalition, your program, your organization? What are some of the strengths that you have?
Dion, could you share with us some of the thoughts that you and work that you've done? I know you're probably busily trying to write it in the chat.
That's okay.
Delaware State.
Yes, we have a long partnership with Delaware State University, and I look at these partnerships that are sustainable as win-win. So what we've been doing over the past few years is working with the psychology department there, and more recently this social work department, and we provide leadership training, BOTF life skills training, and training them to be peer mentors to the other freshmen that are coming in. So we train them, they get opportunities to volunteer, and some we have even hired on as staff. So it's a great opportunity for us to pour into them. And then when they're ready to graduate, if this is a field that they want to go into, they're more than welcome to apply.
I love that, Dion. That the partnerships and giving people the tools and giving them the benefit so that they are invested in the work. And that's why, Dion, you've been in the field for a long time, is that you crack this code, right? In order for people to stay in the work and for us to be successful, people need to be given tools and ownership and that with them, what's in it for them, why there's it's a worthwhile investment for them. I love that. And
absolutely,
even if we're a direct service provider, that's what I love, is that we need to have partnerships. If it's a program, whether it's a coalition, whether you're a direct service, it's all about creating and nurturing those partnerships. I love that, Dion. Thank you. And Naya is saying community connections. And that's another way of saying that, is that we are not working by ourselves. You know what? We can have the best coalition coordinator in the universe, but a coalition coordinator is not going to make changes in the community. The community is going to make changes in the community. It's about those connections and nurturing those partnerships and providing people the opportunity to own it and to get involved and to give them the tools to do it. Love it. Love it.
And Dorothy, you mentioned a key word that I hope we can talk about throughout the training today, is nurturing those relationships and how we go about doing that intentionally. So if we leave, or if the staff leaves, we have processes in place to continue nurturing those relationships on an ongoing basis. And that's what we're going to be talking a lot about today.
You know, the other thing I'd like to say, and Abigail, I really want to come back to you when you were talking about your youth groups, is that leadership. And we often talk about like transformational leadership or collaborative leadership as being a really important element of sustainability, giving people the opportunity to lead and to own. And it sounds like you really do that with those youth groups that you're working with.
Yeah, so we first, like last year, it was like president, vice president, and that kind of thing, like a traditional leadership format. But the kids were like, we don't like that format of leadership. So it actually became a dual to president leadership. And then they're kind of like the brain minds. And then they have two subcommittees, a like design committee and like a canvas, like an outreach committee. And then they're able to like have like a whole group meeting in the beginning with like the presidents like lead it. Then they kind of split off in their groups, and then they just all feel responsibility because they're all on a like campaign team or design teams. They all have responsibility in it. So even like the club member who might be drawing a poster, they're a part of the design team. So they're, you know, valued as a member, and it's not just the president telling them what to do. So,
you know, I think that we do need to learn more about that program, because it sounds really exciting. And not every adult group is successful in giving authentic empowerment and leadership opportunities for youth. So you're well on your way to sustainability with that group, for sure. And if you can nurture that, wow, what an opportunity for you to get involved.
Yeah, and it's just great, honestly, to see the kids like lights like in their eyes, like light bulb, and they're like, oh, we can do this. And I go, absolutely, you can do this. I was like, I'm not that old, but people don't want to listen to me anymore. So it's like, you're the ones that are gonna make the difference. I'm not gonna make the difference. So
I love that.
yeah.
And Dion said staff training opportunities to learn prevention, like attending CADCA leadership and mid-year. And I love that. And Abigail, you took your youth to CADCA. You know, I think that's one of the best youth trainings out there. And it also shows youth that they're part of something that's so much bigger, that they're part of this really big, cool international movement to be healthy and safe. But I also think, you know, Dion, one of the things I've learned over the years for sustainability is don't give people a task without giving them the tools. And if we bring people to the coalitions and we're asking them to do things, but they don't understand prevention, or they don't understand the importance of environmental strategies, it's going to be like us pushing a boulder uphill. But if we can give them those training opportunities and build their knowledge and their skills, they're going to be excited about the work and empowered to do the work. And so I absolutely love that as a sustainability element, is giving people the tools before we give them the task. Wonderful. So we talked about some successes. What challenges with sustainability, or what questions do you have about sustainability as we've sort of defined both the elements and the levels? What questions or challenges exist when you're thinking about sustainability? I'm going to go back to one thing Dave said as I'm looking at sustainability. I can't tell you how many times I've done a sustainability training. I love talking about sustainability because it involves everything. It involves planning, it involves training, it involves capacity building, and it also involves money. But I can't tell you how often people have just said sustainability is about money. Show me the money. But the money piece is going to be a challenge if we don't have all of those other elements in place before we start asking for those resources. And the resources aren't just money. Esther says, keep the resources coming. That is it. Yeah, it's an ongoing challenge. And Dion said, environmental changes can cause you to reevaluate your sustainability plan. Absolutely. And those environmental strategies are such an important element of sustainability, especially that first element of sustaining outcomes. That's why we need those environmental strategies, because we want to sort of lock in those changes with those environmental strategies, especially in the form of policy and systems change.
Dorothy, for those of you that may know, you're talking about the movie Jerry Maguire, I think, is because when you think about it, you know, we all, those of you that have seen it, when I was in a training, let's people start looking up what's Jerry Maguire. What's about it? It's about an agent who's trying to be an agent for a professional football player. The football player keeps saying, show me the money, show me the money. And Jerry Maguire, is played by Tom Cruise, keeps the moral of the story is he has to show that he's worth the money that he's being showed. And there's also a saying in the movie is you had me at hello, meaning that people will show you the money when they know about you, when they're familiar with you, when you have them at hello, then they'll show you the money. So these processes, these outcomes, we need to be clear about what those are. And when we do that, then people will be able to show us the money.
Love it. Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, great. And I'm thinking, Dorothy, hearing your puppy in the background, is you have been key to sustaining that puppy. Dorothy spent the weekend at the vet, so she has the processes down. Every time the dog eats something that is not good for its stomach, she knows exactly what vet to go to. She knows, so she has her processes down to sustain her puppy. So it was good to hear your puppy chirping in the background.
I just have to tell you, I was hoping that you didn't hear me. And did you see me mute and yell at my daughter to get the dog?
You were smooth, Dorothy. You were smooth.
But you are doing a wonderful job of sustaining your puppies. So again, because you have your systems down and you know what the outcomes are, what a healthy puppy looks like. So thank you for that. And thank you for all of your engagement and sharing. It gives us a lot to talk about as we go through this training. And are you seeing my screen with key elements of sustainability? Good. So just to reiterate what Dorothy said, what we're going to spend the bulk of the next bit of time talking about is building those elements up, how we sustain our outcomes and what that really means. And again, sustaining the processes, because those processes do lead to the outcomes. And as what you've said is, we don't do it as an organization, we do it by engaging our partners and by building ownership of it. Because when people own our programs, our coalitions, our organizations, they want to see those sustained. So we need these three pieces in place. Then we're going to come back with, once we have these, how do we develop that sustainability plan, which then we start saying, how do we get the money to sustain this? So it's about having these three things in place first. And I'm just reading through what Dion has said, training community leaders and educators how to implement direct services, sustain the programs. By training them how, they will build the ownership of it. Because again, if people are involved in decision-making, whether it's adult or youth, then they're going to want to see their efforts and their outcomes sustained. Thank you for that. Excellent. So we're going to walk through each of these three elements of sustainability. And so the first element is sustaining outcomes. So I just want to talk about a little bit for a coalition. What are the outcomes? And you can add this to the chat box or shout it out. What are the outcomes for a coalition? And as Dorothy said, we can talk about sustainability through these three lenses of a coalition, of an organization, a provider, and specific programs. But what are again, when we think about a coalition, what are outcomes for a coalition? Participation, right? Do we have that membership? Do we have, and it's more than people showing up at meetings. We can provide, I can get 100 people at my meeting if I provide good chicken sandwiches, but do we provide their engagement and their participation in what we're doing? Thank you, Brianna, those connections. Do we have connections with people, prevent the onset? So what are we doing? Thank you, Dion. What are our strategies, coalitions? Dorothy mentioned environmental strategies. If you're a drug-free community coalition, you're doing both individual strategies and you're doing environmental strategies. How do we put those policies in place, and how do we make sure those policies are in place and enforced for the long term? So a coalition, we're talking about a membership-based organization. How do we sustain the membership and the strategies we're doing? A prevention provider is a little bit different. What are good outcomes for a prevention provider? What are we looking to sustain when we talk about outcomes for a prevention provider? That's providing specific services in the community or providing specific programs in the community. What might sustainability look like in outcomes for a provider? I'll say, Dion, the challenge to typing, the same thing. We want to, whatever they're doing for substance use prevention, whatever they're doing to do that, we want to sustain the outcomes of their strategies. It's the engagement of their partners. Thank you, Esther. We want to think about who are partners, who are supporters of our organization. Do we have a board of directors? Who's on that board of directors? How do we continue their engagement and their ownership? If we're engaging youth, how do we engage youth in the specific services and programs that we're providing? So again, sustainability looks a little bit different when we have volunteers working through a coalition. When we look at a provider, there's a board of directors. You may have volunteers involved with your programs. We need to continue those. And then if we're doing a program, we can do sustainability around that program. So within, say, Abigail's coalition, she's going to take steps to sustain the coalition. She's also taking steps to sustain the specific youth program at the individual. I think you said you're at 4 different high schools. We need to sustain the effort at those 4 different high schools. So again, Abigail's got, I'll say, a double challenge: sustain the coalition and sustain specific programs. And that means building relationships with each of the schools, with the parents at the schools, with the youth at each of the schools. Okay, and Dion is saying DCCS is a prevention provider that operates like a coalition. And I'm presuming that means a lot of community input, a lot of relationship with partners. We need to sustain those relationships. And you talked earlier about nurturing those relationships. And then Esther talked about periodical assessments. How do we make sure we're engaging and addressing things that are relevant in the community? That's those processes, that SPIF process. These are all the things that we need to sustain when we talk about sustaining outcomes. And so when we talk about sustaining outcomes, we're going to walk through these quickly. It's about looking at what is the vision and making sure people agree on what is it we want to, if we're talking about sustaining over the long term, what is our vision and mission for the long term? What are we going to be doing? And make sure our partners agree to that. We want to make sure our strategies are in place now and in place in the future to sustain that vision. So if we're thinking 5, when we talk vision, 5, 10 years down the road, what are our strategies going to look like 5, 10 years down the road? How do we identify those future strategies? Again, and that takes some imagination to say, if we're going to be, what are we going to look like in 5 years and 10 years? And then finally, we can talk about how we can sustain those. So we're going to be talking about just the first is sustaining that vision and mission. And here is where, again, this is a picture of Mars. It's not a picture of Oregon. If you're looking at, that's not where my house looks like in Oregon. But this is, again, if our vision is to go to Mars, we want to have everybody agree to that. So if we're a coalition, we want our coalition members. If we're a provider organization, we want our board of directors to all agree on what are we doing now, and then what are we going to look like in the future, and make sure we have ownership of that vision. And someone talked about revisiting it periodically. And if you're taking notes for a coalition of an organization, when we talk about what we're going to look like in the future, it could be things like geography served. So right now, if your organization may be serving a county, but you're really only focused in 1 or 2 cities within that county, or you may be in a city and you want to expand to a broader geography, or if you're serving one county and you want to serve to broader counties. I know in Delaware, you may not, I think you only have 1 county in Delaware, is that correct? And you have bunches, is that correct? You have multiple counties.
There's 3 counties.
3 counties. So again, the county structure in Delaware, but say maybe you're serving 1 or 2 school districts. You want to expand the school districts, or you're serving all high schools now. We want to be moving in the future to be serving to more middle schools and elementary schools. So it's thinking about geography. It's thinking about communities served. It's thinking about the continuum of care. Right now we're doing prevention, but we know we need to get into that assessment and intervention. And then we want to get into treatment and referral and build more partnerships with our treatment and aftercare community and our recovery community. So we can start looking across that continuum of care. We may want to do harm reduction. So we can start to think about what are we serving along that continuum of care? And then also thinking about expanding what issues are we taking on? We may be focused on alcohol prevention or tobacco, or moving into opioids, and now we're getting into, so we can look at drugs, or we may say we need to move into mental health. The youth are telling us they're concerned about mental health, so we're going to expand and take on mental health prevention, promotion, and suicide prevention. So it's looking at all these issues to say, we know where we are now, what do we want to look like in the future? And so that's building that view of the future among our stakeholders, whether it's coalition members, our partners, our board of directors, among the youth participants. How do we get their views on what we're going to look like in the future? The second part of this, the next part, is looking at specific outcomes. So we may be able to say right now, this is an example of a coalition, is right now we're working in one city to address underage drinking. We're doing social host laws. We're doing responsible server training. We're doing life skills curriculum. So we're able to look at that and the specific outcomes associated with that. So we're measuring decreasing parents' parties, the 30-day use among youth. And we also are taking on prescription drug misuse. And so we're doing a take back campaign. That's what we're occurring now. And what we're doing, that's what we're doing now. And how we translate to that, the future, we want to say in 5 years, so 2027, what do we want to be doing? What are we going to look like? So this is where we engage our stakeholders, engage our leaders in this. I want to say it's not a fantasizing, but it's this dreaming about what do we want to look like, because we're building our future vision to do these things. So we're going to expand. Right now, we're working in one city to do our environmental strategies around underage drinking. We're going to expand that to 3 more cities. And we're going to expand our prescription medicine to not only look at the drug take back campaign, but we're also going to focus on opioid overdoses and do Narcan or naloxone distribution. We're going to move on to harm reduction strategies, and we're going to be able to promote the outcomes associated with that. So again, it's looking at what we're doing now, what do we want to do in the future? And again, the same thing applies to if we're a provider, human services provider, not necessarily a coalition. What are we doing now? We're providing parenting skills and providing family resources. How are we going to expand that? What's that going to look like in the future? How are we going to, again, make sure we're providing this in all the different cities, all the different localities, all the different schools, and we're going to make sure we expand our services. So the whole point here is to think, what are we doing now? What are these strategies? What are these outcomes we're going to promote in the future?
Okay.
And this is important because we're going to talk a little bit later about funding. This is what potential funders want to know. When you look at the right-hand column here, these outcomes, whether it's for a coalition, I'll go back to our coalition. When we look at those outcomes for the coalition, when we look at outcomes as a service provider, that's what they want to know is how are you going to be sustaining those outcomes? So when you think about writing a grant and for funding that's going to take us through 2027, we need to identify clearly what are those outcomes we can sustain, and then the strategies are how we're going to achieve those outcomes. So this long-term planning really drives what funding requests we're going to be asking for, whether it's in a grant or whether we're going up before a city council and asking for those funding. We need to know what it is we're asking people to fund.
I love this, Dave. I think that part of what it really is bringing up for me is the whole notion of the importance of this constant envisioning of our future. What is it that we see, and where and how do we see ourselves, which guides what is it that we're paying attention to, what is it that we're doing.
Yeah, and it's getting the stakeholders, whether it's again your board members or partners, to go along with you in this. And I'm thinking of Abigail at the school. What you're asking is the school staff, the school administration at each school to say, okay, in some schools, we're getting great youth involvement. How do we continue that over the long term? What are their needs over the long term? So it's asking the school principal, who may or may not be there in 5 years, but it's asking them to say, what do we need? What are your needs in 5 years that we can start building our youth groups to addressing over the next 5 years? So it's looking at, again, what we're doing now, what we need to sustain in the future. Then the second part of all this is, I'm going to just say, I'm going to move forward on this one. So let me ask this. This is what I wanted to get to. Is which best describes how your organization is doing in its long-term planning. So if you could put in the chat box an A, if your organization has a plan for how you'll grow and sustain outcomes over the next 5 years. So you've done that 5-year planning. Put a B if you've done the planning of how you'll grow over the 2 to 3 years. If you're C, if you're having conversations about what you're going to look like in 3 to 5 years. Or D, I am not aware of these types of discussions.
And this is all a safe space.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
We've got a couple of A's. That's amazing. Got a B. We have a plan over the next 2 to 3 years. Esther says A and B.
Yeah.
And do you mind sharing, Esther or Abigail, mind sharing your A's and what you're planning over the next 5 years looks like?
Absolutely. One of the C more important within the Latin American Community Center, in our center, the breakthrough, I don't know how to call it, was when the pandemic started, and the decision of our CEO and president, Maria Mato, back there at that moment, she took these key decisions back there to, we are not going to close, we're going to continue to provide this service to the community, while maybe the rest of the community center were closed. We continue being open and providing these services. And I think that this is as a base. I'm talking just from my point of view. And after that, it was so successful, this strategy that she applied, that it changes the whole concept of the agency and gave us the opportunity to show up, to really serve the community right there and then when they really needed us. And based on that, now we are having these new plans, tangible plans, because now all the organizations that we need to sustain our plans are believing in us. So that is how we are growing. We have a tangible new project in which we have 2 years or 1 year and a half raising the money for, and now you can see tangibly the big building, new building, and this provoked that now we have this need to ask for more provider, more personal. We are planning for the kids that now we are going to be serving in this new building, and how are they moving in the rest of our old buildings and moving the personal. So it implies so many other planning and projects and organizations in the staff, and so now we are in a campaign trying to get these people to contract these new people and offering new plans, and with creating new partnerships. Let's say in our community, which we're Hispanic, so many of us cannot speak English. So we are providing these new education plans for them. If you come and work with LACC in this new building, we are going to provide you the education and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, our training's over. Thank you, Esther. You just covered everything we're going to be covering for this training. But the key point that stood in mine is, one, you have people that have a vision. Here's what we're going to be doing. Two, you said, we're doing a good job of what we're providing now. So people know you're a go-to organization. That gives them confidence to be able to know that you're going to be able to grow and expand in the future, and you can ask for their support in that. So we're going to be covering that. How are you demonstrating the outcomes that you have now so you can build on those and build your credibility for building on those in the future? Thank you. Thank you.
Dave, I just want to say one other thing that really stood out to me, because I just said that is sustainability. What I was, the vision that I got, Esther, as you were talking, is the sense of we're all in this together. And it's because you served the community so well that your partners feel like they're part of your sustainability. It's all of us. It's all of our role to sustain the work. And that's the secret. That is sustainability, is making yourself so embedded into the community and in your partners that when you need that support, it's not if we're going to support them, it's how do we support them together. Brilliant.
Excellent. Thank you. And just ask Abigail or Dion, do you want to just share what your long-term planning looks like?
I know for us, sorry.
Go ahead.
We are starting to expand in middle schools to kind of funnel our kids from middle school to high school clubs. So.
Well, that's perfect. And that's, again, you're building, again, the stretch of, I'll say the reach of what you're doing by working with different schools. Now you have their ownership when they move from the middle school to high school. Those youth are already leaders, and you've built up that over the long term. So that's great. Again, long term, that's called vertical integration is what you're doing. Thank you. Thank you. And Dion?
I think what's helped with our sustainabilities thus far is that we have more than one prevention funding source. And for the next 2 to 3 years, because we have a seat at the Lieutenant Governor's Behavioral Health Consortium, we kind of get a bird's eye view as to the direction that the state is going. And at the present time, they have drafted a trauma-informed continuum of implementation. There's several steps to rolling that out, along with SAMHSA's Tip Book 57, which talks about how to become a trauma-informed behavioral health setting or environment. So we recently had an all-staff training, and I presented to the staff about moving into this new area to get a jump on what's coming down the pike. So over the next 3 years, my CEO has now tasked me with integrating trauma in all facets of our organization, from the receptionist to the safety to maintenance, et cetera. So that's our plan for growing over the next 2 to 3 years.
I love it. What you're being is you're being flexible and responsive to what, I love how you said it, what's coming down the pipe. And you went and looked at that's a great place to go. We need to add that to our training. Look to see where our funders are going, because that's where we can consider what we want to move forward to. We don't want to be driven by funding, but we want to see what the trends are. So, and that's being aware of, again, what's happening in the broader community, the state or the country. That's going to inform us on where we could go as an organization. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. And Dorothy is going to talk about sustainability. Okay. I'm going to continue. I think that's a note. So that's the first one, is looking at what we're going to look like. The second piece here is how we sustain the processes, meaning we have to do the work. We can have the greatest brochures, the greatest people, but we have to do the work that produces our outcomes. And the way we do that is by having this ongoing process, whether it's the SPIF or whatever planning process. And what that means is the way we sustain these processes. We talked about this, doing our regular assessment. Let's find out what are new trends, or youth talking about mental health and substance use. How do we move into that? Always updating our strategic and action plans, engaging our partners in doing that. Dorothy, what do we know about when we engage people in doing the planning?
Because people own what they build, right?
People own what they build, people own what they create. So if we engage folks in doing the strategic and action plans and the implementation, they're going to own their involvement in it. They're going to own their piece of that, and they're going to see it as sustainability for them. If it's a partner organization as well, because they see you're a well-oiled machine, they want to be a part of that. And so finally, we can do our capacity building. You've talked about training. Let's make sure we're getting the training. Dion talked about we're being trained as a trauma-informed organization. Let's make sure we continue to do that and continue our outreach within the community. So we need to build processes in place that do this on an ongoing basis. And when we do that, then we can also then start to identify what resources we need on an ongoing basis. We talked about staff and volunteers. We need those to run the programs. We need organization, whether we're a coalition or a program in a school, again, how the youth are organized, or whether we're a nonprofit organization. We need these resources to keep us running as an organization. We need materials, we need facilities, we need food, if that's the case, for meetings. And we need the training, those intellectual resources. So we can start to look at what are we sustaining in terms of what's it take to run our organization over the long term. And what that translates to, I'm going to keep us moving, is it allows us to say, here's what our budget is now, whatever it takes to run our coalition, our program, and or our organization. Then we can start to say, given what these resources look like now, when we have our picture of the future, then we're able to say, what is a future budget going to look like? And so this is where if we can use the term ballparking, but we need to be able to say, if we want to grow and provide more services and become a trauma-informed organization, move into providing harm reduction strategies, whatever, moving into the middle schools, what's it going to take to run our operations in the future? Because that's what we're going to develop our diversified funding plans for, is for that future budget. So that's why, again, it's that visioning, what do we need to look like in the future? What resources are we going to need? That directly translates into resources to do the work. And I'll just ask, and when you think about this, and this is just a sense for you and your organization, you can put in A, B, C, D, E, F, or G. This is all of the above. What does your organization do well? Just think about your processes that you have in place. Does your organization do a good job of ongoing assessment, ongoing planning, I should have put ongoing for all these, but do you do this on an ongoing basis, just to get a sense of where your organizations are at? We won't ask you to describe it, but I just want to get a chance to think about to hear what your organizational strengths are.
And Dave, while they're doing that, I just wanted to emphasize the key points that you just went over, which I think is really the foundation of a strong sustainability planning. And that is to really identify those resources that we are currently using, that we know we're going to need in the future, and kind of projecting outward what they will cost. How much will it cost for us to have those resources? But it starts with first assessing internally first, what is it that we actually need in order to have our programs and our efforts and our projects run and run well. And oftentimes we don't think of those resources in the categories in which you gave us.
Right, and it takes, again, if we're going to do trainings, let's put in a budget for training. If we're going to send people to CADCA every year, we're going to need to put in a budget to send people to CADCA every year. Delaware, fortunately, you're closer for the annual leadership conference, but again, the others are somewhere around the country, and there's other trainings as well. So how do we, again, I'll just say some challenges some coalitions have is they're afraid to say, we want to grow from a $200,000 budget to $400,000. And they're afraid to think big because they don't think they can get the money. Well, you can't even think about how you can get the money unless you know what money you want to get. So that's what this future thinking, sustainability thinking is about.
Dave, and I'll let you go forward from this, but I refer to that as the Tarzan approach to sustainability. You know, Tarzan swings on a vine and he prays when he gets to the end of that one vine that there's going to be another vine there. And we have to move beyond that. We have to start thinking much more, projecting much more about where we want to be, as opposed to exactly where we are now, and only what's going to keep us exactly where we are.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Carlton. And again, thank you, Abigail and Caitlin, is to be able to share with us. Caitlin, your organization sounds like it's in a good place. Let's look at where we're strong, where we might need to work on some of these elements of the strategic prevention framework that will assure we are going to be, again, flexible and responsive to changes that occur in the community, and by having these processes in place. So another part of sustainability planning is looking at how well you're implementing that SPIF over time. And then the third part of sustainability, and we've talked a lot about this, is building that ownership. And so Dion just said F is my major task. So when Dorothy talks about her, she's going to be talking about some resource development and diversified strategies. You can help Dorothy with that section. So the third element of building of sustainability, as you think about it, we have our vision of the future, what strategies, what we're going to look like. We have a look at our processes. The third element is how do we ensure that our coalition or our organization or our program has ownership by our stakeholders, by people who are involved in it, by people who are integral to making sure that this is a successful organization or strategy. Let's make sure they have their ownership in it. We've talked about that. Dorothy mentioned people own what they create, people own what they decide. And so it's really about how you're engaging your partners and stakeholders in your organization and in your strategies. So it's really, again, we've talked a little bit about it, but it's making sure that we're culturally appropriate and we're meeting the needs of the community, that we're engaging folks in as stakeholders. And we'll talk about a broad definition of stakeholders, who are the people that we need to inform about what we're doing. And then a key piece, or the last two bullets here, is how do we share our outcomes and demonstrate our relevance to the community? And that's really important, that people know what we're doing. A lot of times we're so busy working, we're not, if I can use the expression, tooting our horn. We're letting people know, hey, we are making a difference. They don't know to support us if we don't let them know what we're doing and what support we need. So we need to take that time to, again, make sure we're meeting the cultural competent needs of our community, we're engaging our stakeholders, and we're letting people know what we're doing. So just talking about each of these quickly, again, when we enhance the cultural competence and focus on health equity, that means engaging our clients, engaging the people that we're working with, and making sure that we're meeting their needs and we're engaging them. They will become our clients, our partners will become advocates if we're meeting the needs that they express and we're genuinely reach out to them to engage them in our planning, in our processes. I'm going to go through these quickly. If you have an experience in these and you want to share, but I want to look at our time here and make sure we're meeting our time. The next is engaging our stakeholders, and that's identifying our stakeholders. So whether we're a coalition, our stakeholders are our partners, are our community leaders, are our informal leaders, the neighborhoods we're working in. And if we're a not-for-profit, if we're a service provider, it's our board of directors, it's future potential board of directors, it's our clients, it's our staff, it's our volunteers. If we're again, I'm thinking of the school program, our stakeholders are the youth themselves, the school administration, the parents at that school. Let's make sure we're looking at our stakeholders and we're demonstrating the WIFM, and the WIFM is what's in it for me. What are the benefits to each of those stakeholders? When we do that and we can demonstrate to them that we're addressing issues that are relevant to them, they're going to want to see our efforts continue. Engaging, sharing outcomes. Again, it's making sure that we toot our horn and let people know that successes we're having. We've moved from 4 people in our school club to 50 people, and this is what we're doing. let's share that. Let's go on top of the, if I can go on top of the mountain and yell, here's what we're doing. People will want to join and support something that's successful. And if you can demonstrate that you're addressing what are issues in our community. And then finally, we want to demonstrate that relevance. If we do all these things and we engage people and we let them know what we're doing, they're going to get to the point where they say, do I want to see this organization continue? Or another way of looking at this, can our community afford to not have this organization continue? Can our schools afford not to have these school clubs? They need to see the value of what we're doing, so they will want to see them continue. So the final piece here, we've covered the different elements of sustainability. And if you had for your organization to identify one of these that are most important, what do you think is most important? A, clarify your future. B, identify future strategies. C, build your processes, the strategic prevention framework. D, building ownership. E, identify future funding sources. Or F, other. But what is most important element of sustainability based on what we've covered here? If you only got to pick one, what do you think is most important for your organization?
Go ahead and put it in the chat.
Esther says C, building capacity to implement the SPIF. Dion says E, future funding sources.
And so this is a nice way, even though this is a nice little checklist for our organization to say, what are we doing well? Do we have a good future, a vision of our future? Do we need to work on our processes? So again, these are the elements that we would look at. And Brianna saying D and E, we have good ownership and we identify future funding sources. So again, this is,
I want to just read, Abigail said, sorry, D, for the coalition stance, we have a core group from the coalition, but I feel like we can get more members involved.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I love about this, Dave? When we're talking about sustainability, we often say too, when you've seen one community or one coalition, you've seen one community or one coalition, that when it comes to sustainability, you know, everybody is working on a different element of sustainability. And that's the important piece, is that we hone in on those and shore up those areas that are going to help us lead to sustainability. And that is a great sort of segue into this last piece, because the last piece is the diversified funding strategies. And I just have to say, you know, I used to work in nonprofits and I've run coalitions, and I can't tell you how many coalitions or nonprofits are looking for that unicorn, that magical fundraiser that is going to come in and find the pot of gold, and we can all be hands off, and the unicorn is going to come in with the pot of gold. But the reality is, Dion, there is no unicorn. There is no pot of gold. It's about finding ways to get all those other pieces in place and then diversify your funding strategy. So we're going to go through this last piece pretty quickly, but this is really the icing on the cake, because if we've done all of those things that Dave has just walked us through, then it's going to be easier for us to develop a diversified funding strategy. And I think about a diversified funding strategy as sort of balance, that, you know, if we're so spread that if we lose one piece, it might hurt, but we're not going to sink because we've got so many other slices of the pie to keep us afloat. And that's a diversified funding stream. And so when we're thinking about diversified funding, it's about this, not relying on one source. Esther told the story beautifully when you talked about how the services that you provided into the community and how that illustrated your value. So it built those partnerships. And so they're not now deciding if they're going to support you, it's how they're going to support you. And that's what leads to long-term viability. And we also need to sort of go line item by line item to fund specific projects or element with specific sources. When I work with coalitions that have a big funding stream, like drug-free communities, for example, that's $125,000. I say to coalitions, you're never fundraising for $125,000. You're fundraising for $5,000 and $10,000 and $3,000, and line item by line item, you're trying to get that diversified funding stream. And I love this last piece. You want to have some of those beautiful non-restricted dollars so that you can also lobby for policy change, that you've got the ability to also be a little bit separated from the funders such as state or federal funders. So this is just a quick snapshot of what a diversified funding stream might look like, is that you've got grants and events and individual donors. And then with each one of those elements or pieces of the pie, it makes the whole. And that's exactly what it is. It's looking at a pie. How can we separate and name and frame? And how does certain revenue streams fund certain programs or services or elements of what it is that we're offering in the community? And the only way that we can do this is by developing a plan. The money just doesn't come by accident. You know what? Getting effective outcomes in the community also doesn't happen by accident, it requires a plan. And so does sustainability. It's about being strategic and intentional. So I'm just going to quickly walk through some of those elements of a sustainability plan. First of all, it's your case statement, then a description of what needs to be sustained, the resources to sustain what it is that needs to be sustained, and then that diversified funding plan, which is how do we find the right funder for the right piece?
And Dorothy, I just want to say, you're getting to the sustainability plan now. If you've done everything that we've talked about, and many of you already have, your sustainability plan is in place. What Dorothy is talking about is how you organize it so you then can have it all in one place to be able to go to different funders and say, here's our sustainability plan. This is what we are going to do to sustain these outcomes over the long term.
And if I can just add one more element to that, Dave and Dorothy, is not merely your ability to go to other funders, but now more and more a sustainability plan, an actual document is being required of you. And this actually provides kind of the outline for how to go about sharing what it is that you've already been doing, but organize it in a way that you can articulate it to those funders.
That's exactly it, guys. It's about telling your story. And that's why the diversified funding plan and the sustainability plan comes at the end of sustainability, because if we don't have all those other pieces in place, we don't have a story to tell. And so let's walk through just quickly what that sustainability plan, it's going to talk about who we are. It's going to talk about the fact that there's a need. So think about the strategic prevention framework. The need is the assessment, and how we address the need is going to be the evaluation, is what we've done in the community, how we've identified the need, how we've planned and how we've implemented that plan, and how we've addressed the need. And then how we are successful, again, looking at what our outcomes are. And this is so important, not just when we're looking at state and federal funders. One of the hats I wear is working with United Ways and community foundations to help them find good investments in communities. And that's what they're looking for. Every funder is moving beyond just giving money because it feels good, but investing in communities to get outcomes. And that's why it's so important to be able to sustain those outcomes through using the strategic prevention framework as we're developing our sustainability plan, because we need to show that we're a good investment, that the dollars are going to have a return on that investment. And we also need to show that we have that unique role in the community, why it needs to be us, not another agency or organization, but why we're valued and funding, and hence why we should be supported. We're just going to give you a couple of quick examples of a case statement. But again, once you've got all the pieces in place, you've got your vision, you've got your mission, you've got your partners, it's easier for you then to tell the story of why you should be sustained and who you are. So ABC Coalition makes a difference by collaborating and partnering with a broad range of stakeholders in our town. The diverse coalition comes together around a shared vision. It's really about just putting your story together when you've got all those pieces in place. So who we are, what we do, how we come together, and then what it is that we working on environmental or systems level change. We can also put data in our case statement if we want to, saying that we've seen reductions in past 30-day use of alcohol. We can tell our story here. And then how we're using the funding. We also want to show in that case statement, though, that not that we've completely finished the task, but that the fact that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and that we're worthy of investment in the future, and that there's more work to be done. And so this goes back to what Dave was talking about earlier in visioning what it is that needs to be sustained and where we're going in the future, where we need to go into the future to meet the needs of the community. and to respond to the emerging and growing needs in our community. So that case statement, again, these are slides that Dave has shown us. This is putting all those pieces in place to talk about what those resources are. And we can't build it if we haven't envisioned it, if we haven't been strategic and intentional about identifying where it is we're going to go, and then turning those into line item by line item so that we can then sort of divide and conquer what are our partners, which partner can fill in which piece of the pie so that we can all move forward together in meeting the needs of the community. And this is one of my favorite pieces of coalition work, is help coalitions to identify all of those different ways that we can build diversified funding into our work. And Dion, you said that this is a big part of your work and that you've got multiple funding streams. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to tell us a little bit about how you develop your diversified funding stream, or how you find those different funding streams in your role.
I was just typing something. Well, using the SPIF, because I think we're always looking at our communities, and I encourage my teams to always follow annual reports like Monitoring the Future and our state reports, just to kind of see where the trends are, and look at the measurements maybe over the last 3 years to see, have we made advances in stopping kids from smoking cigarettes? Of course we have, but also during that time, vaping has gone up. So that's an indicator to us that we need to put some kind of intervention there. So if it comes to diversifying funds, for example, and I can't find a grant application on CSAP, then I may go to the American Lung Association and say, hey, we see that there's a gap here. Do you offer any kind of free training? And our staff have gone through the training. We are now certified to do vaping training under the American Lung Association of Delaware, as well as an intervention for schools and a smoking cessation. So that gave us an extra skill set. So when we go out to these schools, and it doesn't have to always be financial diversifying and funding support, now we have a connection with the American Lung Association of Delaware, who has a Kick Butts Generation program that supports students who learn how to do these campaigns. So that gives us another avenue to youth who are already doing it and can operate as peers, but it also gives us the expertise to go into middle schools and other schools and provide a divergent program, or we could do the smoking cessation. So we diversify in that kind of way, where I couldn't find a funding source to get extra money to provide a service, but there was another way around it, just getting my staff trained to provide the service. And sometimes you have to go to private resources like Christiana Care Hospital. If I wanted to do something for our for our young girls who are pregnant, living in low income and don't have the resources, I discovered Blueprints, another website for healthy youth. And it gives you all of these evidence-based programs, and they map out everything for you, even the budgets, even the evaluations that have been done in the research. And when you go to people saying, hey, I got an evidence-based program, you know, it's rated high with SAMHSA, we just need a little bit of money to train your nurses to go out into the community to help these young people where there's a gap in services, that's a win-win. And I'm always looking for that win-win.
You know, there was so much I love about that.
I want to jump in.
Yeah. There was so much I love about that, but one of the things that really stood out to me, Dion, in what you said was, you're not just chasing dollars, you're looking to see what the need is in the community, and then you're looking to find ways to fill that need. And that's authentic sustainability. That's by looking at what the need is in the community and finding dollars or other ways, whether it be training or other resources, to actually meet that need in the community. You're building partnerships by doing that because you're anticipating people's needs. You're proactively finding a way to meet those needs. And what you're doing is you're creating these rock solid partnerships, because the next time there's a need, they're going to say, well, I know Dion's going to have the answer to that. we need to make sure Dion is around because their agency or organization is critically important in our community because they're the ones that are responding to the emerging needs. And that's exactly, and then the money's going to follow, right? The money's going to follow because when you just gave that example, you talked about the need, you talked about the solution, and then you said, oh, by the way, we just need a little bit of money. That's not even an ask. That's just details. I love that.
What I love is the money is following your organization.
Yeah.
Your organization is not following the money. Because I've seen coalitions say 1 minute we're doing alcohol, but there's no more funding for alcohol. So now we're going to shift to opioids because there's funding for opioids. That's not a genuine plan for the future. And it's not based on data of your community. So it's really, I love Dion. That's what I was going to say about what Dion described. She's deciding what we need based on what the community needs. That's funding to do that, not follow the funding.
I just want to point out too, Dion put a really great resource in the chat box, ran.org, that offers templates for 10 steps of getting to outcomes useful in providing a comprehensive plan for funders. So love that. I'm going to write that down to Dion. So we just quickly covered those elements of the diversified funding plan. And again, it's sort of it's putting those pieces in place, and Dion could have wrapped that up in that 2-minute little overview she got, all those slides, and she just talked about how you do it. You find the need, you find the answer to the need, and then you backfill the need, whether it be resources in kind or money. Love it. Amazing, amazing examples of sustainability. So as we wrap up this discussion, just any key points related to sustainability, anything that stands out to you from the discussion or some of the amazing points that were shared by this group today? And I'm going to stop sharing as we wrap up and just talk about any key points.
I'm going to start by just reiterating that Abigail talked to us about how her programs are growing and growing number of people, but also talked about moving to the middle school now that'll feed the high school. That's sustainability. One, she gave ownership to the participants, the young people. People own what they create. They're going to want to see that sustained. She's building the younger people at the middle school. That's showing that we can prevention. We don't just do once, we do prevention throughout a lifespan. We're looking at the long-term picture of what it takes for doing. That to me is what sustainability is all about. So thank you, Abigail.
And, I just want to highlight both Esther and Dion. They both share different stories, but they're saying the same thing, is that they're meeting the need in the community, that they're illustrating and demonstrating that they're a valuable community partner by stepping up and meeting need. And so then when it comes to sustainability, the community is a partner in the sustainability elements because they're such an integral part of meeting the need in the community. That too, that's the secret sauce of sustainability. And it's also the secret sauce of effective community work. Amazing.
So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ask folks what I'm going to do. Let me see if this works here. If I share my screen, forgive me, I'm going to have to go through all of these. Meant to do
nice
this.
review of our training.
Yeah.
Greater outcomes. Now we have to sustain our.
A subliminal message of the entirety of the training. If you guys don't mind, here's what I'd like you to do, if you wouldn't mind. If I can get there. Sorry. Please go ahead and you can use your phones to go ahead and get place it over the QR code there. That'll take you directly on your phone to a very, very quick evaluation that we're going to ask you to complete for us. It's vitally important for the work that we're doing. I want to thank all of you for your participation in this conversation. It has been highly valuable for us, and forgive me, I wasn't putting time checks in there for our purposes. I actually am quite I'm still jet lagged. That's what's going on. I intended for this to go a little bit further than the 11:30 mark, but just forgotten what time we were actually going to end. So forgive that, but please, we were hoping that this series had some real value for you. Please share with us any ideas, any thoughts that you have for how we might be able to continue to do this better for you, and what the needs might be for your consumers, as well as for the staff and teams that you work with. We're very much interested in hearing that. I also put the evaluation in the chat for you to kind of consider as well. And I'll just kind of end with this. First of all, a huge thanks to the state for providing the opportunity, to each and every one of you, to Dion, to Dr. Hackett, to Esther, and to Caitlin, Abigail, Brianna, Talia, and Naya for being with us on today, and for all your contributions throughout. You've informed this training, you've made this training better by your participation. So thank you all for all of that. But lastly, I want to thank the team, my colleagues and my dear friends, Dave and Dorothy, for the extraordinary efforts that you put into not only developing and organizing this conversation, but leading us through this conversation in such a meaningful way. I'm going to give you guys the last words. Thank you so very, very much. I'll go to Dave first. Because it is his birthday and I don't care. It's at the end of the day, I'm going to share it anyway. It's his birthday. I want to thank you, Dave, for being with us on your birthday. He'll be mad at me afterwards. That's okay. And then Dorothy, you can take us home. So Dave, thank you for you.
No, just ditto, ditto, ditto. Thank you all for your active participation. It makes for a much better training, and you've all done so well. You can take the rest of the week off and have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. So if your boss was asked who said it, Dave said it, you can have the rest of the week off. Thank you all for your participation.
You know, I just want to say thank you. I love working with this team, and I've loved this series. And I also love, as a trainer, when I learn as much as I have the opportunity to share. And today that was the case, learning from all of you. So thank you for sharing the great work that you're doing. And happy birthday, Dave. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I hope you are stuffed with turkey or tofurkey or whatever it is if you're a vegetarian. Happy Thanksgiving. And thank you, everyone. It was a great session.
Caitlin just
Thank you.
that is priceless. Take care, everybody. Thank you all so
Happy birthday. Thank you, Carlton. Thank you all.